Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of the Scrimshaw Show. My name is Scrimshaw. I know I haven't done one of these in a while, but one of my 2023 resolutions is to actually get off my ass and record these. So, gotta start somewhere, and gotta just get back into the rhythm of doing this. Follow me on Twitter at Scrimshaw. Read my Substack, scrimshawscripted.substack.com. Got big plans for 2023. Hopefully, I actually follow through on some of my ambitions for once. But it's looking to be a decent, I don't know, coming off of the 2022 I've had, feeling pretty good about 2023, mostly because there's no high-profile U.S. elections for me to call, so those always scare me, substantially more than anything in Canada. Like, even when I get something wrong in Canada, like, it's fine. It is what it is. In America, it's just so much higher stake. It just, so is my hell. I love it. I hate it. I have Stockholm syndrome. Take your pick of words. Today's episode is going to be me mostly just riffing on the three elections I covered this year that I covered to varying degrees of success. Australia, Ontario, and obviously the U.S. midterms. What lessons can be learned, and then sort of lessons for the future. I think the key thing is that there's two ways you can do a sort of like year in review best of. And like last year, it was just very much like calling balls and strikes. I'm like, got this right, got this wrong. And like, that's a fine way of doing it. And I'll probably write that column myself anyways. The thing is, though, especially this year, because there just wasn't a lot. There wasn't really like a lot of stuff. It was a year where there were a lot of like micro events, right? And like if you really want to like give yourself credit for, I really want to give myself credit for getting New York 19 right, or really want to self-flagellate on my, Nick Begich Alaska takes or whatever, you can do it. The thing for me though is that like the big stuff matters more, and I think totting up a win-loss record is less useful, especially in politics, because the thing is, if you get the big thing right, you probably got most of the small things right. Like definitionally, if you said Democrats were going to win the Senate, you had Democrats winning at least three of, if not all four, of the big Senate races, and like, cool. If you had Democrats winning the Senate, you also got everything else right. If you had Democrats losing the Senate, you got a bunch of shit wrong. Like, but I think the thing that's fascinating is, the midterms were obviously like my main focus the second half of the year. And the thing is, they were a fucking roller coaster. Like, I don't feel like a shame admitting it, but like, I definitely hit a lot of the highs and the lows in terms of my opinions and thoughts and sort of views of what was going to happen. Mostly because I didn't know whether to believe them or not. There were moments when I thought Democrats were not just House favorites, but like, I actually thought the case for them being House favorites was fairly strong. I just never wrote it in a column, because if I wrote it in a column, then everyone was going to scream at me. There were times when I, deeply panicked about whether I was just pulling a 2020 again. Like, it was an extremely volatile year, even if my coverage never really showed it. And the reason my coverage never really showed it is because the highs were never worth getting over my skis about, because there was only downside. And there was never really a value to letting the lows get to me enough that I would want to write the column about, like, actually, I think, Democrats might lose the Senate or whatever, especially those stops. The problem is, it also led to a situation where I probably wrote about the U.S., for my Substack at least, substantially less than I might have otherwise. Although, got there in the end, and the Lions coverage did really, really well, so that was good enough for me, I guess. The thing about the U.S., though, is that it's hard to disentangle. It's, I dare say, even impossible to disentangle my coverage of the U.S. from Australia, where I was correct, and Ontario, where I was not, because those things do determine at least the confidence and the tenor and the tone, right? Coming off of Canada 2021, I was back to a version of my arrogant self. I was back to thinking my shit didn't stink. I thought 2020 was an aberration, and I thought I could see the board more clearly than most other people, and therefore I fell into the Virginia trap, right? I fell into the Virginia trap of thinking that, I was the smartest person in the room, and only I was smart enough to figure out what the hell was going on. And, if you actually secretly look at all the data in a way that, I can, because look at me, I'm so fucking smart, well, then you get kicked in the nuts on Virginia. Even my Ontario coverage, at least until I got my head out of my ass, did suffer from a form of this problem, which was I had two distinct things that I was extremely confident I was correct about. One, there was a ceiling on Doug Ford support, and two, the Ontario NDP were going to be nowhere. I was right about the second one of those. They were nowhere. Horwath was a disaster, and they got 23.5% of the vote or whatever. Their vote fell like 10 points. Problem is, the Liberals were also nowhere. And my liberal optimism was just a reflection of the fact that I thought Doug Ford had a roughly 35% ceiling. And I thought the NDP were going to go backwards. And I just kind of thought, well, someone's going to get these votes. They didn't. And I was wrong. And I'm not saying I wasn't wrong. Even though I did bail out. I did bail out of my Del Duca confidence a couple weeks out. But so I guess they're at me, which is fine. I was wrong. You're allowed to call me out for that. But the thing is, though, is that that's the way my brain works. At a fundamental level, my brain works by excluding possibilities, right? I don't start with a theory and work forward from it. I work from elimination and then work backwards, right? If I'm trying to decide on golfers to bet in a given week, I don't look at the slate of golfers and go, okay, so who can win? I just start going through and looking for reasons not to bet on people, right? And if one race, it's not, is this a Mercedes track? It's not a Ferrari track. Checo's probably not going to win. Whatever. And then you just eliminate the field down, or it's not a Mercedes track or whatever. But I'm not looking at it. But that's just the way my mind works, right? I get to outcomes by eliminating other possibilities. The way I kept reassuring myself that I wasn't wrong about the Senate was, okay, can the GOP get to 51 seats? Well, they're not going to win Pennsylvania. Okay. They're not going to win Arizona. Definitely not. They're not winning New Hampshire. Definitely not. It's okay. So then can they pull off a Nevada, Georgia double? No. Okay, then they can't win the Senate. When it came to Herschel Walker, it was, can Herschel get 50% of the vote? No. Can Herschel win a runoff? No. Therefore, the GOP are fucked. That was the way my brain worked. But the thing is, of course, that just because my brain does that logic path doesn't mean it's true. In Australia, it was. I didn't think Morrison was going to be able to hold the tide back in the left-trending suburban and urban seats. He couldn't. I thought there were going to be a few teal independents who got over the line. They did. And I thought that there was going to be a decent chunk of Labor was going to get over the line, maybe even in places where uniform swing wouldn't dictate it, because of the sort of because of disproportionate swing in the suburbs. And there were. My seat count in that election wasn't the greatest, but that was mostly because I didn't have the Greens winning. I didn't have the Greens doing as well as they did. Which, you know what? I'll always be fine with a third party beating my expectations because fuck third parties. Like they always underperform. So I'm always fine going into an election underestimating a third party. That said, though, you do get into this situation where I was back sort of on a high because Australia kept going the way I thought. Ontario didn't. Ontario didn't, and I think the lesson of Ontario is that it isn't always as obvious as you're unpopular, you're going to lose. I think Canada. I think Ontario was a lesson in Canada quality mattering, and I think the fact that the Liberals ran a candidate for leader who was just fundamentally extremely boring and had about as much charisma as the wooden table my laptop is currently sitting on. I think that mattered, and I think 2022 was weirdly a situation where candidate quality seemed to matter more. You had things like Christina Keneally lose to an independent in her heavily Chinese bit of Sydney, where she ran for a lower house seat. A former premier, a former senator, a former front bencher losing as an independent because the local community didn't like that she was a carpetbagger. You had the sort of roar of the teals broadly, where these local independents all did substantially better than the Labour Party did against these or teal candidates all did better against Liberal incumbents than the Labour Party did. And then in Ontario, I think Doug Ford was absolutely beatable, and he wasn't beaten because I think, Andrew Horwath was a disaster, and we all knew she was going to be. And Del Duca was a substantially bigger disaster than I thought he was going to be. Like, I don't want to take too much from that. I think that a lot of people are going to take too much from that because, especially Democrats, kind of need candidate quality to matter more again. With the 2024 Senate map and the fact that, if Democrats want to have a chance to win the Senate or even want to give themselves, an easier path to winning the Senate in 2026, like you kind of need John Tester to win in Montana against presidential partisanship. And so, yeah, I don't want to sort of overread the candidate quality stuff, but I do think that sort of was in my mind. Because all of this is always in my mind, right? The blessing or curse of my memory is that I am fundamentally always remembering other shit, and I'm always bringing other things to the table, and I'm always remembering some fucking foreign election when I think about the U.S. It's just my station in life that I will put myself in positions where I'm always feeling or thinking about possibilities and different combinations and different whatever, and it's just the situation I find myself in. It is also just the case that foreign elections do help an understanding of America. I think one of the things that really did help me this year was the fact that I was drawing lessons not just from this year's foreign elections, but I wrote multiple times about the fact that I got UK 2017 vibes from the midterms, right? I wrote on Twitter and in columns about the sort of just like sense that, oh yeah, you'll beat your polls because you beat your polls last time. I mean, that's sometimes true, and sometimes it's, Theresa May's former call director doing a live podcast and saying, I'm not really loving the campaign, but so I guess we're going to be a big majority. And then Theresa May not only doesn't get a big majority, she loses the majority outright. It's a situation where a lot of people can talk themselves into things. And because the sample size on U.S. elections is every 2 years and on presidential elections every 4 years, you get to the situation where there's just no nuance and there's just no context to the conversation because so few people who cover American politics have the sort of institutional memory of foreign elections to understand that maybe this thing that seems like this big trend actually isn't. It could just be nothing, or this thing that no one's noticing is actually a big thing. The politics of the U.S. is inexorably linked to the politics of the globe. You can't really listen, but I think that this year was a big success for the idea that there are global trends. Not to do the like GFR stuff right away, but like, yeah, it's not surprising to anybody who's looked at foreign elections that Donald Trump wasn't the cause of the suburban swing, and that Republicans were not going to just instantaneously win back the suburbs when he was off the ballot. But you know, I've done that right. Again, the point of this is not to be triumphalist. The thing about, I mean, the biggest thing of the year is that he killed the military. It wasn't an asshole. And I know I could have been an asshole in America. I could have, like, because I was pretty damn on the end of it, right? I was pretty, I was more confident than I acted like. And especially in the Senate. Like, I was extremely confident that I was going to win the Senate. And anybody who ever read any of the long form stuff I did, or listened to Phoenix 30, they heard that, but I just was never going to be that confident on Twitter because 2020 exists. The problem from a sort of lessons to take forward is that it's really hard to know whether I was right about 2022 because I was good lucky. Right? Was it that I correctly calibrated in my head how the candidates mattered? Or is it just that, sometimes you're the guy who goes, show the red, let tail, bets on black, and you got lucky? I don't know the answer to that question. I know. And I think anybody who does tell you that they know the answer is lying. There's no way to know. And the problem is that everybody who's spent, everyone who spent their 2022 saying basically, well, lol, you were wrong in 2020, you're a dumbass. Like, there's a very good chance that all of the people who, we could dunk on because they had a bad 2022, there's a good chance they're all going to be right about 2024. Humility is not something that comes easy to me, and it's not something that comes easy to a lot of people who do this for a living or do this for, a substantial side hustle that has led them to have a substantial following that they would not otherwise have. This shit's hard. And the problem is that no one who's ever right admits that they might have been lucky. I don't know. I have no idea whether or not, like, directionally I was correct. I don't know. I don't know if it was always obvious. And basically, the only reason that I look impressive is that so many people lost their minds. But the problem is that a lot of people got 2018 right, and they got 2020 damn wrong. Like, the wild thing is that especially in America, with how fucking volatile their polling is, you just can't get to a place where you're super confident you know what you're doing or not. It's not a good thing. I don't say any of this with happiness, but I do just understand the world we live in at this point. I think there are a few things that we can know for sure. I think the global fucking realignment's here to stay. I think we're going to continue to see Democrats trend leftward. They're gonna, we're gonna do better in places that fit a certain demographic profile, and they're gonna do worse in places that don't. They're gonna do better in places like South Lake. They're gonna do better in places like Forsyth. They're gonna do better in places of white affluence. The future of the Democratic Party is
affluent, socially liberal whites, and it is less reliant on culturally conservative workers than it's ever been. If you dislike this fact, I don't really know what to tell you, but that's the actual God-given evidence of what's happening in Australia. It's what's happening in the UK. It's just at some point you have to reckon with what happens when Ohio is measurably harder to win for Democrats than Texas. And that isn't a world a lot of people want to reckon with. But in terms of 2024, and I'm not saying Ted Cruz is going to lose before someone decides to be an asshole in the comment section and my mentions. Ted Cruz has a Ted Cruz is in a tighter race. The GOP have a better chance of winning Ohio. They have a better chance of beating Charlie Brown than they do of Florida. Both of them are north of 50% favorites, to be clear, but like Texas is going to be harder for Republicans to win. Not a lot of people really want to admit that that is demonstrably true. What we're seeing is a politics less about economics and more about culture. It's a politics of social bubbles. Politics where social liberals don't want to be in a party that political parties that are culturally conservative, right? Be it Knobs in the U.S., the Convoy in Canada, Brexit in the UK, or just Scott Morrison's general existence. These voters don't like the form of conservatism that's being offered because they're not the people who are being catered to anymore. When you had David Cameron, these people saw a conservative party that cared about what they wanted. Cameroon conservatism was social liberalism, fiscal discipline, or austerity, however you want to frame it. And that's the politics that these people want. They like the idea of sensible, pragmatic politics. And they thought that from the right for a very long time. Now, the cultural conservatism is a bridge too far. Right? You know, be it Andrew Scheer and what the hell? Oh, okay, we're back. You know, be it Andrew Scheer or Aaron O'Toole, sort of the things that they had to say to try and pander to their right flank and stop Maxime Bernier. Be it Scott Morrison bringing a literal lump of coal to the fucking U.S. or to the fucking Australian Parliament. Be it all of the things that Boris Johnson said to win the Brexit referendum, and then as the Prime Minister who delivered Brexit, and then of course Dobbs. This is the new reality, and it's the new reality that cultural conservatives are going to vote for cultural conservatives. It is hard to get meaningful numbers of cultural conservatives to continue to vote against their cultural interest, even if it's in their economic one. It is increasingly difficult to get, middle class, working class voters, even if Democratic policies make them a decent amount of money. It's hard to get them to vote for their economic interests because they see social liberals as fucking weirdos and freaks. Like, I'm sorry, cultural conservatives do think of gay people as sort of weird and odd. I don't. I know there are people who always get mad at me when I say this, but like, I'm sorry, the cultural conservatives think of gay people as weird. They do. Now, they might be perfectly lovely people otherwise, and if we can get them to vote for a left-wing economic perspectives, I'd be fine with it. But they're not going to, so long as the Democratic Party stands for meaningful social liberalism. If the Democratic Party chooses to not stand for meaningful social liberalism, yes, you might get these voters back, but also welcome back to, Republicans winning Forsyth by 63 points or whatever. at the end of the day, the lesson of 2022 is to be less of an asshole, to be less confident in things because things can move very quickly. But I think at the end of the day, the lesson of 2022 is much more than anything. It's just it's hard, and I don't say this in like a oh it's hard, so therefore you should no one be too mean to me. No, no, when I'm wrong, fucking rip my ass. Like fucking come for me. I get some of the most demented shit on this planet sent to me. I know. People hate me. That's fine. I frankly I don't. I can handle it mostly because it's there's never been anything to like there's been things that cross many lines, but like it is. The thing is though is that there needs to be more humility amongst the people who do this. If people want to be given sort of credit of humility for doing this, right, and the fact that it is hard, there has to be more fucking accountability. Day before the Georgia runoffs, I made the point that a forecasting outlet um, updated their Georgia runoff prediction, which had so they had moved the state to lean R the day before the election. They then moved it to a toss up and then moved the runoff from a toss up to lean D. And I made the point that the fact that rating organization had never mentioned the fact that they were at lean R was, in my view, a choice. Plainly, I thought that was a bad choice. No, there was some back and forth that day about my previous track record, yes, but I own my track record. For good or for ill, and in many people's view, I beat myself up too much over it, but for good or for ill, I am who I am. No one, no one, no one can plausibly, no one engaging with my work in a good faith way could say that I shrink from 2020 or from Virginia. They just can't. No one listening to this podcast could say I'm shrinking from Ontario, given the fact that I frame this all as a conversation of what you can learn, not just from when you're right, but also when you're wrong. At the end of the day, I think the big thing that a lot of people get wrong is not just that you make mistakes. Like everyone's going to call some elections wrong. What I think people don't properly understand is that the way that you get your credibility back is not by acting like you didn't call an election wrong. It's by showing people that you've learned from what you called wrong. I have the following I have today because I am one of the very few people who is willing to be as introspective and as willing to talk through not just what I got wrong, but why I got it wrong. More people should absolutely follow that method. What a lot of people like to do is just sort of hand wave away when they were wrong. I don't think you can do that. I think the only reason I was this right this year in America is because I have trapped myself in 2 years of internal self-hatred over 2020 and then 2021. The the forensic nature of my, you can call it self-loathing if you want, is why I got this right. Because the fear, the just like deep-seated fear that I was just running the same shit over and over again, that the 2020 error was going to just come back again by picking who I wanted to win, as opposed to who I thought was going to win, terrified me. And it saved me from saying a lot of dumb shit. It did. if I didn't have the specter of 2020 hanging over me, yeah, there would have been a column in late April, or late August, sorry, 2022, being like Democrats are House favorites. There would have been a lot of arrogance and a lot of, well-deserved clicks that would have come back to bite me in the ass. And the thing is, it might be worth it. It might be worth it in the moment to get the rush of a massive flood of Twitter, of Twitter clout. It's not worth it if you're trying to do this sincerely. It's just not. Like 2023 is a fairly light year. There's a couple. There's one at least Australian state election. There might be an early Canadian, early Canadian provincial election or two. Obviously, there's Alberta. I don't think there's going to be a federal election. Obamacare. I mean, honestly, the fact that Obamacare thinks there will be one makes me think there won't be one, just because he's never right about anything. The Wisconsin Supreme Court, I'll cover it mostly because there's nothing else to cover. Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi. I'll probably cover Kentucky, just because that's the only one that's a plausible, interesting general election. If there's by-elections, if there's special elections, I'll break out the coverage machine. But I think it's going to be less race coverage, and I think it's going to be more. I think I'm going to try and do some broader term stuff, just because it's an off year. It's not a lot on the calendar. I have the space to sort of do things that I haven't been able to do in a little while, and I'd be a fan of that. I think more importantly, for me, I think 2023 is going to be probably the first year that I've done this where I'm not living or dying by the last thing that happened. Don't say this with any joy, but my mood has oscillated wildly between whether or not the last election that happened was one that I got right or one that I got wrong. My actual meaningful internal confidence that I was doing something valuable and good has oscillated wildly. And there was no sort of level below which I would not fall. And if I did have that level, it wasn't very high at all. After Canada, I was euphoric. After Virginia, I was despondent. There have been moments when I wondered what the fuck I was doing. Now, I think I've found level. I think I've learned a lot, both from the highs and the lows this year. I think I am getting things right now in a way that's more sustainable than I was in the past. I think I'm less prone to making dumb mistakes. I think I'm less prone to dumb hyperbole. And I think the big thing is that it's not so short-termist. There have been opportunities that I have intentionally passed up to become the main character of this sort of weird band of, Canadian politics or U.S. politics or elections Twitter. There have been moments. There were plenty of moments this year, this summer, even into the fall, where I had Democrats not just winning the House, but winning the House comfortably in my model. I never tweeted it. The reason I never tweeted it is because I knew that if I tweeted it once, and even if I moved it back by election day, even if I moved it back the next week, the second Republicans won the House, I wasn't gonna be there. And I knew the just sort of like hit of likes and retweets wasn't worth it. In Alberta, there was a period of time when the polls were so good for Rachel Notley that I had her winning, a majority or her number of seats. because I'm mostly going to be leaving. And the thing about post-Ontario is that I don't want that shit being thrown back at me. It's led to a bit of a conservatism in what I do, but I don't say that as a bad thing. I think it's good to not just kind of chuck shit at the wall and hope it sticks. It's fine. We can just be a little bit saner about this. I mean, the wildest thing, and certainly before I get into some, I don't know if I'm going to call them hot takes, but some predictions. The wildest thing about this year is the number of people who I've respected, especially in Canada, who have outed themselves as fans of my work. I think most prominently would be Gerald Butts, the former senior advisor to Justin Trudeau, who was repeatedly said, has said that he's a big fan of my work, and it's just genuinely insane. That's the cool shit for me. Like, I do this for free. I do this, I write a free site for a reason. I just do this to get my own thoughts out of my own head. And it is really cool to see not just to see both the breadth of my support, but also it is really cool to see some of the people who I've respected for a long time be fans of mine. So that's always quite fun. Quickly, I'm just gonna run through some hot takes. Danielle Smith wins in Alberta. New South Wales Labor wins, and they probably win more comfortably than people think. Just because I think that the New South Wales Liberals are going to be way over. Like, I think Uniform Swing is going to say that they're going to hold some seats that they end up losing because of Suburban Swing and GFR and all that crap. I think Democrats hold Kentucky, lose Louisiana, GOP hold Mississippi. None of that should be particularly controversial. I'm gonna say Democrats are slightly favored in that Wisconsin Supreme Court seat, just because. Give me the party of high propensity voters in a spring election. I know the spring election isn't like it's not quite like a random by-election. In the way that it could be. Like, I know Wisconsin is used to the spring election, but I still think that electorate is going to be more educated than a midterm or a presidential year. So give me the party who's more reliant on education now. I think Richie Sunak is probably just going to muddle on. I don't think he calls the election next year. I think it's the 2024 election. I think Keir Starmer will go into 2024 with a smaller polling lead than he currently has, but he'll still have a polling lead. The thing I can't explain, and I need to articulate this in a column at some point. I am less robust on Keir Starmer's chances than a lot of people. He's still going to win. I can't get out of my head the idea that against Sunak, who I think is a competent Tory leader and I think will in time save the party, assuming that they can have a growing economy and get out of some of the economic crises relatively easily. I just think Starmer's still pretty shit. It's not an ideology thing for me. It's just he's pretty shit. And it might be enough. It might be a situation where the Tories have just done so much damage that it's a landslide anyways. He's fucking he's just shit. Can we just say this? I hate the dude so much. He's just such a fucking empty suit. I hate him so much. If there's a Canadian election in 2023, I think Justin Trudeau wins it. I don't think there will be one because I don't think it'll be. I just refuse to think the NDP is going to be stupid enough to trigger an election and put their legislative agenda at risk. It would be a really dumb move for them to do, and I don't This is the parliament. This is your dream parliament, guys. I don't know what you're thinking you're gonna get. Like you're not going to replace them, and the whole thing that you want is to be a sizable block of votes enough to give the Liberals an office. This is your wet dream of a parliament. Shut up and just fucking do what they want. Anyways, I hope this has been interesting. I'm not entirely sure it has been, but your mileage may vary. If you're looking for a Christmas gift, it'll probably come late, but Salvation of the Storm exists. It's my book. I read it last year. It's still very good. You should buy it. Follow me on Twitter at Scrimshaw. Follow Scrimshaw on Twitter. I will just say one of the great things of this year has just been the variety of sort of collaborations and partnerships I've gotten to do. I was a frequent guest on the Kudzu Vine and politics. So shouts to all of them for having me on as frequently as they did. I always enjoy doing it, and then obviously gotta make a sort of massive shout out, a special one to Ryan Jacobeski, who was a sort of frequent collaborator this year, who I consider to be a deeply close friend and someone who indelibly makes me smarter, and I think without him, the chances that I might have done exceedingly stupid shit, both ways during my coverage of the American elections. I think Ryan's a great guy. I love doing this podcast every so often, and I greatly appreciate him talking me out of some very stupid things. So, happy Merry Christmas. I'll be back in the new year with hopefully more reliable podcasts, and yeah, glad to do it, guys. Have a great one.